Hello and welcome back to myself, Rich, and part 2 of my video, which is looking at my 3 modern performance car classics: the Mercedes-Benz SL 500 R230, Porsche Boxster S987 Gen 1, and my Mark 1 Audi TT 3.2 V6. So part 1 was the introduction, this is part 2, and it's going to be focused on my Mark 1 Audi TT. This is my 2004 3.2 V6 Quattro. It's got about 77,000 miles. It's the VR6 engine, narrow angled V6. In fact, it's so narrow it's almost an inline 6 actually, with the Audi's Quattro 4-wheel drive system. 2+2 coupe, and we'll come on to the +2 in this review. And I've owned it for about just over 6 months. But previous to that, I had a Mark 1 TT, the 1.8 turbo 180. In fact, it was actually a 190 brake horsepower, front wheel drive, because it was a very late Mark 1. So just a quick canter through the Mark 1 TT. First showed back in the mid-90s, in about 95 at the Frankfurt Motor Show, where Audi showed off a concept car that really took the motor world by storm with its radical design and looks both inside and outside. And then surprisingly, 3 years later, Audi put the TT that we know today, the Mark 1, into production with very, very little change from the concept car 3 years before. And immediately that it was released, it became a huge success, and so much so that in the about 8 years of the Mark 1, from sort of 98 through to early 06, Audi sold about 40,000 Mark 1s, and what that's done is really saturated the market with these great cars, the majority of which are the 1.8 4-cylinder turbos in either 180 or 225 power, and again in either front wheel drive or Audi's 4-wheel drive Quattro system. The 3.2 V6, of those 40,000, there's about, I think it's about 3,500 of them are 3.2 V6s, so a lot rarer. And I bought this as I just love the TT, and I think if there's one engine that's going to hold the value that bit better, it's going to be the 3.2 V6s. I think it suits the nature. We'll get on to the strengths and weaknesses of the car in this short review, but I think in regard to the way the engine pulls and the way the engine sounds, it really does suit its nature. So just have a quick look at, so from the outside, how do you know it's a 3.2 V6? There's a couple of very quick telltale signs. The front bumper here, if we just sort of pan down, you can see there, this front bumper is very different on the 3.2, the VR6 engines. The 1.8 turbos had a different front bumper. And then if we sort of pan out towards the back of the car, the other distinguishing factor is the rear spoiler, which has got this sort of black rubber strip enhancer. And they're the only sort of clear details that tell you this is the 3.2 V6. Well, other than the fact it's got 3.2 Quattro on the back of it, as you can see there. So let's have a look inside the car. Just open the door. So full leather, which I think just most TTs were, to tell you the truth. This one comes with the optional DSG gearbox, as you can see, and we'll just have a look, and if I can, I'll just show you the back seats there. If you're looking at buying a TT of any mark, you'll generally find that the seats wear very, very well, take their age very, very well, and the miles well. And the rear seats should be immaculate, and that's probably because they are very unusable, which I'll come on to as part of the weak point. This, as I say, about 76,000 miles. It's showing very little signs of wear, considering it's a 15-year-old car. There's some light wear here where my finger's pointing, which, if you can just have a look there. So that's again, for your comparison, 75, 76,000 miles, 15-year-olds. And the rest of the car here, the lumbar supports, they're in pretty good shape, I think, and certainly comparable to my Porsche and Mercedes for wear. If you have a quick glance around, you'll see dominated by these aluminium circles here, really throughout the car, and the air vents, on the doors as well. And it's just a design feature, really. And if we just have a look, the radio sits behind that metal flap there, very much a traditional radio, not at all similar to the Porsche and Mercedes that went for huge complexity. But what the TT did have was, if you see those switches there, are the heated seats, and I think there's 6 or 7 settings there for each seat. And I mean, why the complexity, I do not know for something like a heated seat, but they work incredibly well. And then just zooming into the DSG gearbox. DSG gearbox there suits the Mark 1 3.2 V6, I think, really well. It's a really torquey, really powerful engine. It just suits the characteristics of it. It just gives acceleration, gives gear changes so rapid. It's a dual clutch system and works really, really well. Let's just pan back. In the doors, you'll see these, and this is these stowage that are just made of elastic and sort of some mesh string. Build quality, I compare this to the Mercedes SL. The Mercedes SL 500 was 3.5 times the price of a TT when new. Mine on the SL are badly wearing. Here you see not wearing at all, and they are used, and they actually work really, really well. Let me just show you where the boot release is. There's a little slider here, if you can just see as I slide that open, and in there, just if I can get, you'll see some switches. One of those is fuel, and also one of them is the boot release. So let's have a look in the boot. So the TT is a really practical car, and I think that's one of the strengths of the TT. I mean, that's the size of the boot. It's a really good size boot. We can get a whole family's worth of weekly shopping in there. It's got really good, really good, really practicable. And one of the best things for it, just by simply pulling on these levers here, and the seats, both seats, rear seats, collapse forward, and suddenly you've got yourself lots and lots of space. You'll find that under the boot is the spare wheel and is the battery. You just literally have to pull that, and then there's a wheel there. Just rotate that, and that's access to the battery. But a really practical car, and that's again one of the strengths of the TT is its usability. The twin exhaust of the 3.2 V6, the same as the 225 powered 1.8 turbos. The 180s had single exhaust. Let's go and have a look under the bonnet, just quickly, just to show you what the bonnet. There's a catch release there, so let's go and have a quick look under here. Just while I walk round, you'll notice these ride on quite large alloys, and one of the things you've got to be careful about with these alloys is they sit very pronounced, and they are very, very easy to curb. So you've got to take extreme caution and extreme care when you're parking with these. And these, just for your note, these are 18-inch alloys. So let's just pop there's a bonnet release here somewhere. There we go, found it straight away. So that's the 3.2 V6. There, it sits very forward, and that's one of the traits of the Audi TT. For the 3.2 V6, it was known as a heavy engine over the front axle, so it causes a very nose-heavy car. And Audi designed everything they could to remove understeer as much as possible, and we'll come on to that on the later strengths and weaknesses. So there's the lump, there's your coolant in the centre of the picture, your dipstick right at the front. your oil filler cap there. And then the interesting one, actually, the strange one is where Audi decided to put the screen wash filler up cap, and it's actually down the side here, and it's right in there. That's where the screen wash goes. So that's enough for under the bonnet. So I'll just drop that very carefully. So let's have a look at running costs for the Mark 1 TT. So this is, yeah, like you said, I've only owned this for 6 months. But what I've done, it's got full documented service history. So I've done all the paperwork and got all the receipts and everything that's been done to this car. So I thought the fair comparison against each of these, including the Boxster S and the SL500, is to run them over, average it out over 3 years. So in that time, most of them will have had a couple of services, enough time for things to go wrong, put enough miles on these cars. So just to give you a flavour, so miles per gallon, in the 6 months, I'm averaging somewhere around 31, 32 miles per gallon. Now, to some people that's not great. To me, I think that's actually a really good value for the TT, because I compare this just to the Porsche Boxster S 987, which is the same cylinders, same capacity, 3.2. That's the Porsche's a flat 6, obviously, not the V6. And the Porsche Boxsters gets between 25 and 26. So, and they both produce similar sort of horsepower. This Mark 1 produces just under 250 compared to the Porsche's 280. So I think as a comparison, that's actually pretty good in regard to miles per gallon. If you look at servicing then, so in the 3 years this car has been serviced twice. It's also had a Haldex service, which is the Quattro service as well. It's been serviced regardless of mileage. It's gone on years, so every second year it's been serviced. So if I include all the repairs, all MOTs, all consumables, tyres and everything, the car in the 3 years has done 13,000 miles, and it's cost just over £1,500 on running costs, which, so it's working out at somewhere around about 4,000 miles per annum and about £500 to £600 a year. Now that is significantly less than the Porsche Boxster S, and even more under the Mercedes SL500. So as far as running cost goes, there's a big tick here for the Mark 1 TT. Let's have a look at its strengths then. So what have I found over the last 6 months? Looks is a very specific and very individual thing, but I genuinely believe this car will stand the test of time brilliantly. I just think it looks refreshing, even though it's a 15-year-old car and over a 20-year-old design. It just looks, I think, so good now, and I think it's just going to age really, really well. For the 3.2 V6, the sound of that engine is fantastic, and it sounds absolutely incredible. The way it revs, and with the DSG gearbox, which mates up to the VR6 engine so well, it causes rapid gear changes, and it's a really, really great gearbox and a great engine. And it's also incredibly practical. Yes, the rear seats are not good, but regarding boot space, I mean, this is a really practicable 2-seater or 2+2 seater coupe. And for a 4-wheel drive coupe, 250 brake horsepower, the running costs, I think, have come in much, much lower than I ever forecast. And the biggest, I think, strength for the Mark 1 TTs is the value. I mean, you can pick up TTs now for under £1,000. And again, I'm not saying that you go and spend just £1,000 on a TT unless you're handy with some tools. But the 1.8 turbos, you can get a half decent one for probably £2,500, and the 3.2 V6s generally start at about £3,000 for anything that's okay. I think if you want one in really good condition with full dealer or specialist service history, and that's probably as good as you're going to get with a 15-year-old car, then you're probably looking at sort of 3-4 up and K and upwards. But again, it's tremendous value if you compare it to my other cars. But what's not so good to like about it? Well, the ride of the 3.2 V6 is very firm, bordering harsh, I would say at times, and that could be partly to do with the alloys, riding on 18-inch alloys, but it is a very, very firm ride, so don't expect huge amounts of comfort. Steering, it does really lack feedback. It just doesn't tell you what the tyres or the car's doing underneath you, and most of the time that doesn't really matter because you're not near the limit, but when you really want to push on, it just doesn't give you that communicative feedback that something like the Porsche Boxster S does. The V6, great engine, great sound, but it is right over that front axle, and it is a nose heavy, and it will, if you push the car to the limit, it has a tendency to understeer just by the nature of it being so nose heavy. And you've got to remember, the Haldex 4-wheel drive system from Audi, it is 4-wheel drive, but it's predominantly front-wheel drive, and it only puts the power to the rear when it's needed, and that'll only ever be no more than 50-50, so just be aware of that. The rear seats, as seats, are pretty pointless. Even if you can squeeze somebody in on the leg room, the problem is where the boot closes, it just removes any headroom, so the borderline pointless, really, the rear seats. But as I say, they do fall flat, and it does give you great practicability to getting more storage space. Headlights are not good, and I found that on my first TT, and I thought it may have just been a trait of that one. Well, this one's no different, and there's probably things out there with halogen bulbs you can probably do and just to increase the lights, and if you live in a more urban setting, you might not suffer as badly, but I live out in the country and rural and dark country lanes, and I mean, this doesn't get used too much during the dark, but when it does, you do notice that they're distinctly weak compared to the SL500 and the Porsche Boxster S. And then the final weak part for me is the cup holders, and I mentioned this in the first video, and it just really annoys me that if this is one of your main cars, then not having cup holders, it does really annoy me, because there are some plastic apertures in the glove box that were sort of designed for, well, Audi could say they were cup holders, but they're absolutely useless, and there's a few aftermarket ones that you can put around sort of in between the front seats, around the just rear of the handbrake. But again, that means modifying the car, and I like to keep my car standard. So again, cup holders for me, small little details but can make a big impact. The known problems, there's curved alloys, there's windows not dropping when you try to open them, and for the DSG in particular is the mechatronic unit. Now, just a word of caution on my running costs. My running costs this car have come in really low, but actually if I'd have done it over 4 years, that would have included replacing the mechatronic unit in the DSG gearbox. That's not cheap, and the part alone's about £1,000, and then you've got the labour associated with fitting it, so you're probably looking at probably 1.5k for replacing that mechatronic unit. Those costs weren't in this car. If they'd done it over 4 years, they would have done. That would have shoved up the prices. So just be aware of the mechatronic unit, which is certainly if it's been done, great. If it's not, just be aware that if you get one of these Mark 1s, then it's certainly something that could fail in time. Value of these, I touched on it earlier. Really good value cars. Are you going to see big gains in value of these? Probably not. There's probably still too many about, although standard, really low mileage, good quality ones are getting less and less. So they certainly will become more sought after in time, but with the vast numbers that you've got still on the road, I can't see any significant rises. But buy the right car, keep it well maintained, get a good Audi specialist servicing it, and it should lose no money in value in the future. Before I bought this, did look at a few other cars, competitors, and I could mention the Nissan 350Z, Alpha GT, RX-8, Focus ST, Z4. There's a whole host of potential, but do you know what? If you wanted a coupe that's around 250 horsepower, four-wheel drive, you're really limited, and actually it's quite a niche market that it sits in. So, what's my summary of the TT? I say, I've had it 6 months. What do I think so far? Well, if you're going to buy one of these, get the best you can afford. For me, full service history is an absolute must. You're not going to get, or highly unlikely to get, main dealer, but I would always look for one that's had Audi specialist service history, because then you know it's all been done right. Make sure it's been serviced at least every second year, and make sure you've got receipts that back everything up as well. I don't think you'll lose any money on this. If you buy the right car, you run it well, just get it serviced, replace things as things break, keep on top of the maintenance. I don't think you'll lose a penny on these. And then it comes into, I suppose, the value part of this. This TT, for me, is probably my TT's worth, for me, 5.5K. It's half the price of the Boxster S that I've got, the 987 Gen 1. My question is it half the car? And yes, it doesn't have the driver involvement that the Porsche Boxster S can give, but 95% of the time, that doesn't make any difference because you're nowhere near the limit of the car. And it gives you so much pounds for, or so much value for every pound. It's half the price of the Porsche Boxster, but gives you, as I say, 95% of what the Boxster S gives you. And my adage is, if you parked in a car park next to the Boxster S and both drivers got out, would you as the Audi TT driver think it's only half the car of the Boxster S? And the answer is no. The only difference would be is that you've actually got several £1,000s tucked in your back pocket that you've saved over the Boxster S. So yes, it doesn't communicate like the Porsche does, but it's actually, it sounds a lot better. And for looks, it just kills the Porsche for looks, and the SL, because it's just so retro. So that's my sort of whiz round my Mark 1 TT. What I'm going to do now is do some other videos in the next few weeks on the Porsche Boxster S and the Mercedes SL 500. And then we'll come back to the TT probably in a couple of months' time to see how it's running, and to see how many miles I've done, has there been any problems, issues, niggles, etc. There's no planned work for this, for the TT at the moment. Yeah, so I hope it's been informative. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please give me a thumbs up. If you really like it, please subscribe, and I'll be uploading the next video in a couple of weeks' time. So thanks very much for watching, and see you all soon.